Hey Ignite, it's great to be back together for another one of our impossible interviews. And today I've got my Uncle Pete joining us. So Pete, do you want to just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do and where you are?
Yeah, well, number one, I'm Ben's uncle, so that's obviously the most important bit of information you're going to get today. I'm Floss's brother, just in case you hadn't quite worked that bit out. So I'm a medical doctor, GP by profession, and also involved in the leadership of Eastgate Church, which is in Kent, North Kent, just south of the River Thames and just outside London. We're near the M25. Largest car park in the world, as we call it. So, and I've had the privilege of leading this church since I was 30 years old, and from when I was a full-time GP, and it's grown from 25 adults, 10 kids to what it is now, about 800 or 900 people, and we also run what's called Heaven in Healthcare, which is helping those who work in the health world deliver heaven wherever they are. So.
Brilliant.
Really
And I mean, I came down to Eastgate, I think last year, it must have been a year ago, and just massively blessed. I had a great time at your Encounter Week with your school team. It was really great. So we've got a few questions just to throw you away. So what do you normally have for breakfast? What would be a normal breakfast for you?
Well, that's easy. Cereal is the number one thing. It's got to be cereal, but it's not just breakfast, is it? Cereal goes throughout, and that's an any part of the day food, I think, but generally cereal, sometimes porridge,
Yeah.
but, and then if I'm at the moment, I've got a bit of a taste for bagels.
Okay.
Rather than toast, sometimes toast, but bagels.
Good. Cool.
Cereals, and we have them stacked on the top of our fridge. There's sort of a whole choice,
Yeah, my kids love a choice, something different each day. So we're exploring the impossible things that God is doing at the moment, or has done, because he didn't just do miracles back in the Bible, he's doing miracles now. And so what have been some of the impossible things that you've seen God do and has kind of impacted your life in some way?
Yeah, great question. Loads, to be honest. I was born again when I was 16, and with an understanding that nothing was impossible for God, so I should expect the impossible things. And so I've actually seen those since I was a teenager, and I'm now a bit older than a teenager, a little bit, but I feel like a teenager inside. And so I have seen miracles throughout more than 40 years. And there's some of them stand out. I've seen people healed of cancer. I've seen people healed of AIDS. I've seen people healed all sorts of things, many diseases. But probably the standout thing for me was when I was in Mexico in 1995, when I basically prayed with some in the most desolate part of the world. Couldn't have got more bleak or poor. And this 18-year-old who was basically paralyzed in all four limbs. Because he'd had a brain injury when he was 8 years old, and so he hadn't walked or used his arms for 10 years. And I was asked to go there to see him medically. Medically it was useless. It would have been very very difficult to help him in this country, let alone there. But I knew there was very little I could offer with the medical side of things, but God could. So, cutting a long story short, we prayed for him, and God led me through a process of increasing faith, which was interesting. So when I'm praying for the sick, I'm always trying to hear God, because faith comes from hearing. It's not just having heard, but actually in the moment hearing. So, and he asked me if I could. I asked me to ask if I could have the blanket taken off him. He had a sort of blanket covering him, and so I did that. And then, as we were praying, I noticed a very, very significant change in him, which other people wouldn't have noticed if they weren't medical. That's where medical knowledge can put you at the forefront of healing. And I saw that his legs went, instead of being all tight and spastic, which is spastic is the word for spasm. So he actually went floppy, and I thought, wow, now he was still completely paralyzed. So functionally no difference, but for me something had happened, and then which encouraged me. So that bit of faith, that was a simple little step. Take the blanket off. The next step was more difficult, when God said to me, right now, Pete, I want you to ask if you can pick him up and put his feet on the floor and let him go. And I thought, there's a big there's a big gap between the blanket and that. God, I would have liked a few in between stages.
Yes.
Okay, this is going to take courage. And what was interesting, that I had some other friends with me, Christians from the UK, and one of them told me not to do it. He said, no, you can't do that. And he was frightened. And fear is never going to help you when you're pursuing the miraculous. So I had to ignore him. My other friend encouraged me, saying, yeah, Pete, go for it. And I thought, that's all very well for you to say. In one sense, but it was a strange deal. I had the mixture of encouragement and discouragement, trying to battle for this. And that's a very common thing in the world of healing, because there are people, many people who don't get healed. And if you hold on to that discouragement, then you'll stop going for it. So I ignored this guy. I picked this young man called Attilio up. He weighed next to nothing because he didn't have any muscle bulk, because he hadn't used his arms and legs for 10 years. So even if God got rid of the paralysis, his legs wouldn't work.
Yes.
I don't know if you've ever, if you slept funny on your arm. And you wake up and you think, I can't use this thing. so his muscles wouldn't have worked. So the idea of putting his feet on the ground and expecting anything other than him to fall over was definitely impossible. Anyway, I did it. I picked him up and I had to turn him around, face him towards the door, put his feet on the ground, and I let go, and he walked out the door.
What?
He walked out the door, and everybody was absolutely overwhelmed. Tears of joy. His mum was staggered. The missionaries who work in there, they'd been visiting him every week, and they were just, God suddenly broke through. Now, he was known throughout the whole area because it was not a very big community. And that miracle started to change that whole people group. So that was good. And then I need to tell the rest of the story, because obviously I was flying. I think, I'm amazing. Because you pray for something like that and it does something in you, which is encourage you, but there's a temptation to then think, oh, I'm really good at this. And you're no good at it without God. That's the number one. So later on that day, I was actually dealing with a lot of medical stuff. I was doing a medical clinic. And the big problem they had in this place was terrible diarrhea from what's called dysentery, amoebic dysentery. And so 1/4 of their children died before the age of 5.
Oh, wow.
1/4. And they did nothing about it, in terms of they were so fatalistic and accepting of life's hardships that they actually didn't bother to follow the medical advice, which was to boil their water. Could have saved the kids' lives simply by boiling their water, but they didn't bother. They were so downtrodden and hopeless that they didn't do that. Anyway, cut the long story short, there was a baby there, and about 18 months old, who had dysentery and was already badly dehydrated. And for me, really frustrating, because I knew if I'd been in England with her, I could have put her in hospital, put her on a drip. I would have saved her life through medicine. But there, I didn't have those medicines, and we prayed and nothing happened. And I knew as the mum walked away with this baby, I said to my friends, I said that baby's going to die today unless a miracle happens. Now that's difficult on the two fronts. Difficult because and difficult saying that, but difficult knowing that actually I had the skill to save that life medically, but I didn't have the opportunity to do it. So it was tough. But I had a whole crowd of people waiting for me, so I had to carry on. And so almost put it out of mind, but it didn't disappear from my mind. That evening I was preaching in the little chapel that I had. It was dark. They had no electricity, so they had one of these little, you've been in these places where they sort of just run a generator and try and keep a light bulb flickering, that sort of place. That was it. And as I finished preaching, I said, we're going to pray for the sick now. And as I did that, I saw this baby with the mum, and the baby was lying in a lifeless form across its mum's lap. And cutting long story short, the baby was dead. She was doing what's called the death rattle. It's called Cheyne-Stokes breathing, but she gone. She was completely unresponsive. And but I thought, what? We saw a miracle this morning. Attilio, pick him up. He walks out the door. We're going to do it again. And so we prayed for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, no change. And I thought, I think this child is dying. Actually, it has died in front of me. And that was tough, and in the end, I actually cracked. I broke emotionally, and I got so angry with God really angry with God. I'm not sure I've ever been as angry with God as that moment in time, because I didn't understand how he would let a baby die in front of me while I was praying, and yet I'd seen this amazing miracle in the morning. And this was probably the biggest lesson in my life spiritually that I've ever learned. I walked away. I left the meeting. I walked outside. I've had enough. I thought, I'm not doing this. It was too much of a pain and a frustration, and I was ranting with God. I don't know if you ever rant with. You do, Ben. Because not be funny. You've been there. You've been through something like this.
Yes.
I know personally, and without bringing that up to raise emotions, but that's a reality. We have to deal with stuff. And I was cross with God, and I wasn't listening very much at that moment, but he still got through. He whispered to me, and I find it fascinating. Sometimes he won't shout at me, but the whisper came through, and somehow in my ranting and raving, I heard his voice, and he asked me a question, and I thought it was the most stupid question I've ever heard in my life. He said, "Pete, why are you praying?" I thought, that is a stupid question. This is me talking to God. That is the dumbest question I think I've ever heard. And yet I knew he was asking me. I knew it was God asking me a question. And I know when he asks questions, it's not because he's lacking answers.
Yes.
There was something to this question that was important in that moment in time. Although for me, I thought, that is a stupid question, and I was not interested in it. And then a realization hit me that was horrible, to be honest. And I realized that actually ever since the morning, I've been rehearsing the stories I'd tell when I got back to England.
Yeah.
Of these amazing miracles and how I look really big, to other Christians and special. And so I've been rehearsing my my testimony, and I think, prowess as a Christian, and think, well, I'm pretty special here. And I realized that actually when I was praying for the baby, I wasn't thinking of the baby. Not really. I wasn't loving this baby. I was thinking of me. And it wasn't compassion that was driving me forward. It was actually my reputation, and I think. And at that point, I broke over my own wrongdoing, so to speak, and I wept, and I felt responsible for this child's death. And I said I was so sorry. I repented to God, and I said, "Look, God, I just don't know what to do." And at that moment, something quite extraordinary happened, and I can't explain it in any other way than that God just met me in a literally an extraordinary way. And it's a bit like if you've seen, if you watch Star Trek and the Beam Me Up, Scotty, when this comes down, it's like I had a come down of the compassion of God just flooded me, and it overflowed me, and all of a sudden I found I loved this baby in a way that was as if she was my own child. That's the only way I could describe it. I had such an intense passion for this baby, and yet she was dead. And I was longing for this baby to come back, to live, but knew that I'd blown it. And then God spoke to me and he whispered to me, "Pete, you can go back now." So I went back somewhat sheepishly. And as I went back, I approached the mum, baby's dead, lifeless form across her lap. And then God spoke to me again. He said, "Right, Pete, I want you to ask the mum to breastfeed her baby." Now that is a pretty gruesome idea, breastfeed a dead baby. That's not a nice thought, is it really? So I was not over chuffed at this bit of instruction. A bit like in the morning, it was a bit of a challenge. I think.
Yeah.
But I asked her to do it, and the mum did it. To my surprise, so she put the baby to the breast, and the baby fell off lifeless. And I said, "Do it again." And then she put the baby to the breast, and the baby started to feed. And 10 minutes later, she was perfectly well and normal.
Whoa!
And I resolved then that I didn't care if I never told her story. Also, what I resolved was I would never know her name.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want it to be about her being found as a celebrity. I just cared that she had life. And she'd be about 26 years old now, hopefully having her own family. And I'm just delighted that she's alive. But I wouldn't know who she is. I couldn't find her, and I wouldn't think she'd know me if I went back. So that was probably my biggest day of learning that the Bible tells you that faith without love is just a clanging cymbal. And I was actually a clanging spiritual cymbal in that place, making a dreadful racket, and God arrested me. And so ever since then, I've made sure that when I pray for people, it's because I love them unconditionally, that I'm interested in their outcome, not my story. And I'm not a testimony collector. I'm there to unconditionally love and demonstrate the power of God.
Yeah, that's great. So I know there's probably a whole wealth of stuff that the kids have taken from that, but if you had kind of one tip, one thing that we can act on, we can put into practice to help us really believe God for impossible things and see him do impossible, what would be the one thing you'd really encourage us to do as a youth group?
I would say experience God. It's absolutely, God's not a theory, he's an experience. And if you experience him, you'll start to understand how powerful he is. And don't apologize for experience. Have experience for experience's sake. You don't have to explain it. Don't have to explain it to other people even. And it can be gentle, it can be strong, it can be weird, it can seem normal. It doesn't matter. Just experience God and let him do whatever he chooses to do. And let the Holy Spirit have his way with you. So if I go back to the story I've just told, 2 weeks prior to that, I've been prayed for by a couple called John and Carol Arnott from the Toronto Vineyard Church. And it was around the time of the Toronto Blessing. And they prayed for me for about 20 minutes.
Wow. One
at my head, one at my feet. And honestly, the power of God just went through me. It was like being plugged into the mains electricity for 20 minutes. And honestly, and this is not, I'm not joking, I thought I might die. That was how, but I didn't, I wanted it to stop, but I didn't want it to stop. It's a really strange, this is, I don't know what to do with myself, but I didn't want it to stop me. But after that, I was complete. Now they actually prayed, generally, but also specifically because of this trip that I was doing to Mexico. And I look back and think, you couldn't unconvince me that God was powerful after that encounter.
Yeah.
And we need those encounters that will persuade you that God is powerful. And what the Bible says is our faith doesn't rest on wise and persuasive words, but on the power of God.
Yeah.
And so you won't get to see miracles through theory. You will get to see miracles through encountering God.
That's great. Thank you so much for giving us your time and sharing your stories. It's been great to have you with us. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. Take care.
Thanks, Ben. Have a good time.